Hey, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Anthony DeSimone with his newest edition of Penguins Pointers. A little bit of a recap here, looking at the last three games for the Penguins. All three games have gone into overtime. Unfortunately, the Penguins have only been able to get one overtime win. The other two ones fell into the overtime loss category, but at least they were able to get a point. On the 25th, they had gone and played St. Louis and won 4-3 in overtime, of Getty Malkin scoring the game-winning goal there. On the 27th, on Friday, they fell to the Columbus Blue Jackets in a very hard-fought game against the Jackets. Very physical, not a lot of offense, really good defense. Malkin once again had the goal in that game as the Pens fell 2-1 in overtime. And last night, the Penguins once again fell in overtime to the Edmonton Oilers 3-2 in a game in which Malkin had the two goals that the Penguins had put up in the second period. Now, as I had said, the important thing to mention here is Malkin has scored the last four goals for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the last three games. He had the game-winning goal against the Blues, he had the one-game goal against the Jackets, and he had the two in the loss to the Edmonton Oilers. So in the last three games, the Penguins have gone 1-0-2. They have picked up 4 points, but they have been two tough losses. Speaking of tough losses, we'll switch over to some of my thoughts on the Penguins' play in the last couple games. It's tough losses. It really is. To sit there and see them play 60 minutes, and in last night's case, 65 minutes of really solid hockey. You can see the emotion out on the ice, especially with Malkin out there putting a lot of good shifts in, getting the last four goals for the Penguins. It's tough as fans and as players and coaches to see a team lose like this when any other night the game would have went their way. So it's really tough to kind of stare at these games. I know I was a little frustrated watching the end of in the shootout against Edmonton, but at the same time, you have to sit there and go, they really didn't do anything wrong. They had scored on the power play. Malkin had brought them back in the second period after they looked a little lost in the first period. They couldn't. They had some really good chances, too, in that overtime. Malkin almost had his hat trick, and Nielsen for the Edmonton Oilers had a great stick save to keep that puck out of the net. Two saves, actually. Malkin got two cracks at it, but they're tough losses for the Penguins, and that's going to happen. You're going to get into the grind of the season, and you're going to have some of these nitty-gritty tough losses, but you have to take away some of the positives. And some of the positives that are listed below is you have great effort during these last three games against the opponents that the Penguins have faced off against. I don't see anything really awfully negative about their gameplay. A lot of good board play, a lot of physical defensive playing. Penalties could be down a little bit. We're taking a couple more penalties than we should. That's the only criticism I really have about their last three games. But they've played really well. There's a lot of effort on the ice. Malkin's definitely putting a lot of effort down. Fleury's showing some emotion in his acrobatic saves, and even Phil Kessel and Patrick Hornquist are getting in there, making some rushes down the ice. Dumoulin made a great stop in last night's loss to the Oilers, where one of the Oilers, I can't remember who it was, got a breakaway and nearly scored on the 3-on-3 overtime, but Dumoulin came back and stick poke-checked him right at the last second. I think it was Taylor Hall. But it's just that kind of great effort that we're seeing from the Penguins, and it kind of gets overshadowed by the fact that they've lost their last two games. Moving down the list, the power play is producing better than it has been. It started out the season with a 6% conversion rate. It has now scored on the last 6 games and has converted at 22% in those last 6 games, which has pulled them up in the standings. They were the bottom of the league. Now they're 24th at 16%, which still isn't great, but it's producing, and we're seeing, some power play productivity out of there, and I think that has something to do with they changed the mentality to a shot-first mentality. And when you change to a shot-first mentality, you get a lot of pucks on net, and when you have a player like Patrick Hornquist sitting in front of the net, getting in the goaltender's sight line, not afraid to get checked in the back over and over again by defensemen, you're going to get those goals that trickle by the netminder just because of his net presence. And he's being in the way, making traffic so the puck can find its way through. As for the penalty kills holding up at 7th place in the NHL right now at 84%. still pretty good. The numbers tapered off a little bit. We've been getting a little lazy on the penalty kill, and we're seeing a couple more goals being scored by opponents, but we're still in that top 10 bracket. So the penalty kill, I'm not too concerned about. The one thing I will address is Malkin has been on fire these last stint of games. He now has 11 goals and 11 assists for 22 points this season. And like I had said, he has, I think, 7 goals in his last 6 games, and he has the Penguins' last 4 goals over their last 3 games. The man is just out there, and he is on a mission. Ever since that closed-door meeting when he said the team needed to look in a mirror, you've seen him produce and play with such a great amount of more emotion on the ice. You just see him when he scores. He's flailing around on the ice. He's smacking off the boards when he scores. That "don't slash me, bro" celebration he did when he scored in Columbus last night, or 2 nights ago. That was just, you can see the emotion on the ice that he's putting out there, and players are feeding off of that emotion, and you're seeing that extra bit of energy being resembled on other players on the ice. So I like what he's doing, and I hope he stays on this hot streak as long as he can, because I think he's one of the reasons that these last 3 games weren't 3 losses. Because easily, if you don't have a player like him on the ice producing that way and putting that emotion in and out every night on the ice, I think they probably would look at a standing of 1-2 in their last 3 instead of 1-0-2. So I like seeing what he's doing. And lastly, referring to that 1-0-2 with the 2 overtime losses, it's really not anything the Penguins are doing awfully wrong. It's just they're missing that horseshoe in their back pocket. No one's tucking it in their back pocket when they're going on the ice tonight. You know, that proverbial luck. A lot of crossbars getting hit, a lot of lucky saves by goaltenders, a couple bad bounces that let goals in on Fleury and Zadkov's side. It's just that's where the Penguins are. They've played really exceptionally well these last 3 to 4 games. It's just the stats don't show it because they just haven't had luck on their side in hockey. And as we all know, and as I can tell you, hockey is 90% luck, 10% skill. You know, you can go out there and play the best game you want, but if luck is not on your side, you won't win that game. So, looking at the effects of the 1-0-2 gameplay in the last 3 games, Penguins still find themselves, we're looking at the standings here, still find themselves in 3rd place, but it's becoming a distant 3rd place now. The pack is starting to be separated a little bit here, and that's what's going to start to happen when you start getting into the middle of the season like we are right now. Up at the top of the standings, actually, the Capitals have overtaken the Rangers. These stats are as of 10 o'clock Saturday, so if any games finish Saturday or are playing late Saturday, they're not accompanied into those stats here, but right now, the Capitals hold a 1-point lead on the Rangers with 17 wins to the Rangers' 16. The Penguins are next in line, 6 points behind the Rangers with 28. Those 2 overtime losses are huge because otherwise we find ourselves with 26 points behind the Islanders. But instead, we are ahead of the Islanders due to the fact that we have more wins and we have played less games, even though we're tied. Moving on down the list, not much has changed below the Islanders. The top 4 teams keep flopping. The bottom 4 teams stay the same. The Devils find themselves in 5th place with the Flyers behind them by a point. Carolina and the Blue Jackets share last place. Even though Blue Jackets have looked exceptionally well in their last previous games, still find themselves in the bottom of the standings because it is real hard to erase an 0-8 start. But they're doing their best. But like I was saying, the 1-0-2 record in their last 3 really didn't hurt them too much. You still pick up 4 points. Yeah, you could have had, 5 or 6 points, but, it's better than 2 flat-out losses where we get nothing and we find ourselves sitting at the 26-point mark in 4th place. But now the problem becomes, now the Rangers and Capitals are starting to pull away a little bit. The Penguins are going to need to get a couple wins, and they're going to find a bit of a challenge coming up with that as we look at the next game coming up, which is they're off till Tuesday night. It's a late night game for us on the East Coast, a 7 o'clock start on the West, as we are finding ourselves in San Jose taking on the Sharks. That'll be a road game. It is on December 1st. That's a Tuesday night. It'll air at 10:30 here. For the Sharks, a couple things to note. They have a power play that is worse than ours, believe it or not. Their power play is ranked 28th at 14%, And a weak spot that I see aside from that is their penalty kill is not the greatest. They are toward the bottom of the pack in the NHL with a conversion or a save rate on their penalty kill of 80%. So what I see out of this is, even though these two teams don't have good power plays, I don't think the power play is going to be a big factor in the game, but if the Penguins wanted to squeak one by, considering their recent success, I can see that happening. But honestly, with the two power play standings that these two teams have, and I don't see it. I don't see a power play goal going to be scored in this West Coast game. And this is going to be a real tough game for the Penguins because they start a 4-game road trip coming up. And this game is very pivotal because if they go to San Jose and lose, then this is going to be a long, long road trip for the Penguins. And that's not what we need right now, considering that the top two teams in our conference or division are starting to pull away from the pack. So hopefully they can go into San Jose, get a win, get some confidence, and maybe take 2 or even 3 games on this 4-game road trip they have coming up. But that's my greatest concern right now is if we go into San Jose and don't win, I feel this road trip is going to be a road trip where maybe we get 1 win, and 1-3 in those 4 games is not going to fare well in the standings. We're going to find ourselves even further back from the top teams in our division. So the other thing I want to talk about real quick before we wrap this up is I have not seen it yet, and I don't know if anybody has noticed it yet, but where's this offensive breakout for the Penguins? I know I've been mentioning in the blogs recently that, it's early in the season, players are still getting chemistry, but we're now, a quarter of the way through the season now, about, 25 games into the regular season. The Penguins are 22, most teams are 24, but they have not had, and I'll have to check back through, but they have not had a 6-goal night yet. And I know that's hard in the NHL with the increased ability of goaltenders and better equipment for the netminders, but they haven't had a game where they have simply buried their opponent and had a crushing victory. And then I think that's something that the Penguins are missing, and I think that's something that they need to really solidify their confidence, because what's happening is we'll get these 1 or 2 goal leads and they'll vanish going into the third period. And I think it's because the Penguins are lacking this confidence of we can close this game out. We haven't seen a game from the Penguins this year where we go to the third period up 3-1 and we score that third goal to take that 3-goal lead. And when that doesn't happen, you leave the door open for these teams to come back in and tie the game or pull within 1 and make it closer than you like. And I think that's something the Penguins really need to try to get done in these upcoming games, is they need to have a game, and it's going to be tough on the road, but they need to have a game where they go in there, take a 2-goal lead, and put 1 or 2 more on the board, finish the game, 6-2, 6-1, 5-2, and just solidify a win where they can kind of go in cruise control through the third period and know what that feels like. Because I haven't seen that this season, and I think that's part of the reason why a lot of these games are decided by 1 goal or 2 goals with the Penguins right now, is they haven't had that explosive night where they are just finding the net. And that contributes to the fact that they just haven't had the horseshoe in their pocket these last stretch of games, and that's going to happen, but you've got to figure it out. Malkin's apparently figured it out. Malkin's got 4 goals in the last 3 games and 7 in the last 6. So Malkin knows what's going on the ice. Now it becomes a question of when is Crosby and Kessel and Hornquist and Perron, when are those guys going to hit their hot streaks? Because if you get 2 or 3 of those guys hitting their hot streak, even Dupuis, if you get 2 or 3 of them hitting that hot streak at the same time, that's when you see those games where the Penguins start putting up 5-6 goals a night. And kind of going back to that old way of the Penguins where they're offense first, defense second. But until that happens, they need to continue to focus on protecting their netminder. And I felt that tonight or last night they haven't really been doing that good of a job. Fleury in the Columbus game was really holding them in there. The offense wasn't there and the defense wasn't much better. And then last night in Edmonton, they had left Zadkov out to dry a few times. And that's concerning because now you don't have your offense clicking and you're not supporting your netminder. That's a dangerous game to be playing because that makes it so easy for other teams to have those games where we lost 4-0 to the Devils. That's where that happens, is where you're trying so hard on offense, not succeeding, and in failing to succeed on the offensive end, you leave the defensive end open, and the goalie's left out to dry on a couple plays, and next thing you know, you find yourself down 3 goals. So it's tough, and this is where I'm not a coach. That's what Johnston gets paid for. That's what the players get paid to play on the ice for. They have to figure out that balance. I still agree with the idea of being conservative, but I am starting to become a little concerned that they haven't had one night where they're throwing caution to the wind and trying to rack up as many goals as possible. And I think that needs to happen soon to continue to establish that the Penguins are an offensive team, not a defensive team. So, just my thought. I still agree with the whole playing smart on the defensive end and covering Fleury, because what better way to make a goaltender better than to protect him like the Rangers do with Henrik Lundqvist? I mean, that's why he is an outstanding goaltender. No disrespect to him. He is a wonderful netminder by himself, but he is nothing without the Rangers organization and their players. They help him be the goalie that he is because of the way they protect him and give all those block shots and stick checks and poke checks to keep the puck away from him. And that's why they find themselves above us in the standings. They have that good balance of offensive pressure with a defensive mentality. So that's what the Penguins need to work on in these next couple games. I'm hoping maybe we can see an offensive night on one of these road games. It's going to be tough since they are road games, but who knows? Hockey's been a weird season this year. There were 8 overtime games Friday night, which broke an NHL record. And there's been crazy things. Just the way games have ended and the way players have scored, like Malkin's spinorama goal that dinged off that cross member bar. Oh, watching that was just something else. If you didn't watch that happened in last night's game. Feel free to check that out. Malkin had stolen the puck from a defenseman, turned right around and did a spinorama move around the other defenseman and backhanded one over Nilsson, the netminder, and it just dinged off that goal post so hard. You knew that was a goal, and that was that was a fantastic goal to see. If you haven't seen it, go check that out. Either go on NHL or YouTube and look it up. It was fantastic. But that's the kind of NHL season we're seeing this year. It's goalie dominated, and it's wild finishes. It really is. There's a lot of overtime games this season, and I'm glad they implemented this 3-on-3 rule now this season, because if not, you would see a lot of goaltenders mad because they're forced to go to the shootout, because the stats are there. They were talking about it on the Penguins broadcast against the Blue Jackets. When it was 4-on-4 overtime, the percentage of games that went to a shootout was in the 50% range. Now that they've implemented the 3-on-3 rule, that percentage has dropped into the low 30% range, which means there's less shootouts, and they're slowly getting rid of the idea of pinning the game on the goaltender's back, which is maybe why this is becoming a goaltender season. So, just some stuff to think about as you watch hockey. Don't sit there and yell that Crosby sucks and Malkin's a terrible player. Sit there and actually think about the game before you start yelling out things like that, because I tell you what, some of these comments on social media, and I'll have to do a blog just on social media comments that I've seen on the Penguins posts, and other teams' posts as well. It's not just the Penguins fans, but some fans really just don't do their homework and don't watch the progressions of games. They just sit there and rant about, oh, he's a terrible player. And I'm sitting there going, really? The guy's in the NHL playing for one of the top teams in the NHL, and he's a bad player? Really? Because the Penguins want to shell out millions of dollars for a player that doesn't do anything. That just, people's common sense. But anyway, I digress. So, I'm going to wrap this baby up. Thank you guys so much for listening in. Please hit the like button down below, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. Try to keep these up on a weekly basis, 3, 4, 5 game stint, and I'll put another one up, so keep an eye out for them. But for tonight, thank you guys for listening in, and I'll catch you guys next time. Go Pens!